up, dude? Welcome. This is Joshy J. Yeah, this is a bit of a clickbait title. Don't listen to anyone. But I thought that this is quite a relevant thing, and I think it applied to me very, very well. There was a stage in my life where I actually didn't listen to anyone. I don't advise this. I think maybe people need to go through this in phases when they need it most. I remember the phase for me was kind of when I was trying to just take control of the things that were out of control. I was like, okay, I'm not going to listen to anyone. I need to know, I need to understand like everything that's going on here. So it was a good time. It was a good learning phase, but I would say it is worth it to be skeptical of who you listen to. So I mean, ultimately, if you think about listening to what other people have to say, it's really good to take. I heard this one quote that said all the best artists, they take advice and they learn from everyone, but then they end up just making their own decisions, and then they do what they were going to do anyway. So it's worth it to take advice from people and to listen to other artists. But it's even better then after that to kind of dissect everything that they've said and be like, okay, like, does this apply to me specifically? I mean, I know for myself at least that I'm very careful about what I let inside my mind, and very careful with what advice I take and from who I take it from. There was a time where I remember I was taking advice from almost anyone and everyone, and a lot of different artists that were on a different journey to me. And I think it's quite dangerous to do that, because I mean, like, everyone is on a different path, they're on a different journey, and I think the people who are on a similar type of journey to you can give you similar type of advice, and kind of type of advice that you would be relevant to you specifically. So I remember there was this phase where I was taking advice from everyone and anyone, and I was like, I mean, yeah, if you take enough advice, it all just cancels to zero anyway. So you have to take enough advice to know which advice not to take. And the minute I realized this, I was like, okay, let me now see which people are on the same journey as me or a similar journey to me. And a lot of the advice that I took was from people that weren't actually artists, but they had a similar mind frame to me, and they had a similar value set to me. And I knew that this advice was valuable, and I could in some deep way, apply it to the way I think about art, or the way I think about making art. And this was actually quite a game changer when I realized this. I didn't cut the other people out of my life, but I just made sure that there was a bit of a like they had to go through two phases to make sure, like, what they were saying, I didn't want to just take it like all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I wanted to know, like, yeah, I understand that this type of a person or this type of an influence is on a different journey to me. So I didn't want to immediately just assume that it applied to me. But with the types of people and the types of art that is similar to you, can kind of let your guard down a little bit, because you know that they have like a similar goal frame. It doesn't necessarily need to be exactly the same. I mean, for instance, I followed I used to get very into one artist, and I would dissect that artist's entire process, and I would get very into the way they did things specifically. And it was actually great, because I learned so much just from that one artist, just from dissecting every single little thing that they do. Like, I would go and like zoom into the types of things that they drew and painted, and I would do like a master study of those little things. Like, my sketchbook was filled up with them. So I understood that artist at a very, very deep level, like the way that they did things, because I was like, that really resonates with me. Like, that's what hits home, and that's what I think will benefit my art. And then I got to a stage where I was like, okay, like I need to know when to let go of an artist that I'm following. I need to learn to like realize, okay, I've learned all I can from this artist, and I've done all I can, and I need to realize when it's time to move on and learn something else from some other artist. And it's kind of like an intuition process. You can't necessarily, I wouldn't be able to give you hardcore cold facts of when to do it and like when is the right time. You kind of like listen to your own evolutionary intuition, and you kind of like, okay, like I've learned a lot from this artist and it's been great, but I think it's time for me to like, I think I can move on to a different artist because I've grown and I've taken all the aspects from them and I really understand the way that they do things. And the cool part is like when you go to another artist and then you like, and then you say, and then you're learning stuff from them, you still have those things that you've pulled through from the artist before, and that the way that like the little bit that what you've learned from them, you kind of fuse it with this new art form or this new type of artist that you're learning from, and then when you move on to the next one, it's like you've pulled all these very interesting little aspects from different really great artists that start to then form you as an artist. And that's the coolest part about the internet, actually. I mean, the internet can be very dangerous, but the coolest part is that you get to discover there's so many artists out there, and there's so many portfolios out there, and you get to take bits and pieces from each of them, the ones that you like. I remember like one of my friends was telling me that if you want to look for an art style that's interesting, or you want to build one that's interesting, you take two seemingly artists that are in two different ballparks and two different art games, and you fuse them together to make one unique thing. And I thought that was really cool. There was a stage when I still do very very painterly type of work, and I took one artist in that realm, and I took a very graphic kind of, you could say, rigid type of an artist, and I fused the way that they did things together. And I just remember discovering such interesting things just from doing this process, and it was amazing to actually do that. My friend actually suggested it to me, and I was like, yeah, like that's a cool way to do it. You throw yourself out there, and then you kind of have to, it's like getting thrown out there with no map, and you kind of have to figure your way through. I think maybe it's a personality thing to enjoy that. Some people like a lot of structure and rigidity, and they need that, like, I'm going to do this thing step by step 1, 2, 3, 4. But I think art is a journey. I remember Marco Bucci saying, like, art is backpacking. Like, you get dropped in a country and you haven't booked any place to stay. You know where you're staying your first night, but then after that, it's like, I don't know what I'm saying. So I thought that was very true, in the sense that you get thrown out there and you kind of have to like make do with what you've got and what you've learned up to this point. And your visual library phase is kind of like the phase when you're packing your bag to go backpacking, because then you're packing in the things that you need. It's like you're packing in the tools and the things that are gonna add value to your journey as an artist. That's what you're doing, and that process can go on for a while. Like mine was a solid, like maybe 2 years or a year and a half of like just building my visual library. So I was like, okay, this is the kind of art I want to create. I'm going to let this in my brain. I'm going to let this become part of my art career. I'm going to let this become a deep, intimate part of my artistic development. And I was like, okay, and then I had to dissect the things that I didn't want. So I had to take out like stuff that I'd pre-learned and be like, okay, this actually doesn't apply to me at all. and this is not something I want to grow, or I want to evolve inside. So that part is that is actually the phase where I didn't listen to anyone. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I just think it's a bad thing to probably do forever. I mean, if you don't listen to anyone forever, you lose out on a lot of things that you probably wouldn't think of by yourself, or a lot of interesting creative ideas that you kind of maybe would not have gotten to. So when I was speaking about the internet earlier and how it opens up like a lot of great things in terms of discovering advice and interesting ideas from other people. And I mean, it can be fatiguing. Like, I think maybe a lot of artists have heard of something called like internet fatigue, where I know the people that I used to study with, or in the past, they said like they would feel crippled by going through like Pinterest or going through the internet to look for either inspirational art or reference stuff. It's just like endless amounts of things to go through. And I think it becomes less hard. The internet becomes less fatiguing when you become more stronger mentally, and you become more solid and decisive in your directional approach. Then you're like, okay, I know what I'm looking for. I know what is going to apply to me, and I know what I can use, and I know that this will be a relevant tool to me. And you get to very quickly go through this very focused, without going down a rabbit hole of just like not really knowing what you're looking for. So you kind of like, you know what you're looking for, and you're using those internet tools as just tools, because they are just that. It's not like they're taking you for a ride. You are using them as like a tool. And I think when you start to use the internet and those different media pages like Pinterest and ArtStation and Instagram, etc., as just tools, it doesn't become so crippling to go through. So I just know that I picked a few artists that I trusted very deeply because of their direction, not because I knew them personally, but because I knew that the way that they did things was the way that either I wanted to do things, or was already doing things, or doing things that way, or I hadn't learned that yet, but I was on that path. So it's worth picking a few artists, and I actually have a list of my favorite artists, and I'm like, these are the guys I'll go to when I need advice on solving a problem. And I'm talking about like visually solving a problem. I'm not talking about like, a lot of them are actually too famous. You DM famous artists and most of them don't actually have time to reply, or they just get so many messages, that bombarded with messages, that they can't. So I'd write it down, and I need to know that I can go through and figure out visually what these guys are saying, and kind of the way that they solve problems. I'm like, that's a cool way to do it, and I want to try and adopt that same type of a thing. So yeah, I have very few artists that I trust visually that I can go to and be like I've dissected a whole lot of them, but I know that there's few that I can go to. I can go to their page, and I know they'll have solutions to the way that I want to do things if I don't know how to do it yet already. And you kind of get to know the way that they do things at a deep level that you couldn't really articulate, but you know how they do it. And yeah, this builds you as an artist. So this builds you into the kind of artist that you are today. So it's I don't think anyone can ever structurally tell you what your journey is, because a lot of the time with art, that's the beautiful part, is that you figure it out as you're going along. That's the coolest part about it. At least for myself, that's the coolest part about it. So anyway, thank you so much for sticking through. This is my advice on don't listen to anyone. And I hope you guys like the artwork playing in the background. And yeah, if you guys want to see, if you like my art, hit a subscribe. And you can check out my other media channels for more cool artwork. And otherwise, I will check you guys in the next one. Cheers.